Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So as you saw from the title of this video, I'll be swatching all of my foundations for you all. This will be super helpful if you are on the dusky spectrum of skin tones who are very close to my skin tone and you take my foundation shades as your reference. I have pretty much all the foundations with me that caters to dusky skin tones. I did accumulate a lot of foundations in the past year itself. I think there are at least 100 foundations with me right now for my skin tone. That's a lot for one person. I also receive a lot of PR from companies and I do purchase foundations for my YouTube channel as well. My life totally revolves around makeup, so that is why I have a ton of products with me. So I have a lot of affordable / drugstore foundations with me and a couple of high-end foundations as well. If you're on the duskier category, you might not wanna miss this video. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. My skin is all bare. I have literally nothing on my skin except some moisturizer. I've filled in my eyebrows a little bit and a little bit of a tinted lip balm, but other than that, there is nothing on my face. Before beginning with the swatches, I already cleansed my skin using the Dermavive Hydra cleanser, which is really mild and gentle even if you have sensitive skin types. It gets rid of all the dirt and impurity away without tripping away the moisture and maintains the pH level of your skin. To moisturize and prep my skin further, I'm taking my Neutriderm Vitamin E Moisturizing Lotion, which I absolutely love wearing with or without makeup. So I'm taking a good amount of the moisturizer and putting that on my entire face as well as my neck and massaging it completely. It acts as a very nice pre-makeup base and provides a lot of hydration and nourishment. I'm just gonna swatch everything without any particular order. I've got a bunch of sugar foundations with me, so let's begin with that. I do work with Sugar Cosmetics quite often, so all of these sugar products have been sent to me by the brand. I've got their Ace of Face foundation stick in 3 different shades. First, I'm taking the shade Americano. It's a very nice creamy formula and has a lot of coverage as well. I've got the same foundation in the shade Romano and the number is 57. So that's how Romano looks like. I've also got this foundation in a deeper shade and this is called Espresso and the number is 65. I think this is the deepest shade of foundation that is available in this particular range. This is how 65 Espresso looks like. Although the shade 65 looks like a very close match to my skin tone, but the shade 57 Romano is my perfect match. See how that blends into my skin tone. It's a very nice match. And 65 is definitely a bit more orangey and darker. And the shade Americano is way too light on my skin tone. Generally in Sugar Cosmetics, Americano is my shade, but the shade Americano in the stick foundation is not my shade. I've also got their fairly new product for foundation. This is the Rage for Coverage 24-hour foundation. This comes in this tube packaging and again this is in the shade Americano, which happens to be their deepest shade. Honestly, they could have done a little bit better with the foundation shade in this particular range because this is the darkest and deepest shade available. So I'm just going to take a little bit of that. So this is the shade Americano. This is the shade Americano in the Rage for Coverage liquid foundation. This is an excellent foundation for oily skin types. It is very matte on the skin and it controls your oil and has a great coverage as well. But the shade range definitely needs to be worked, especially for the deeper skin tones. This is how it looks after it is blended out. The shade Americano is still a good match. It's probably half a shade lighter. It kind of matches the skin on my neck, but not exactly to my color of my face. Then I have their Drop the Base Serum Liquid Foundation and this is in the shade Lungo and the number is 60. So this comes in this dropper bottle thing. This is how the shade Lungo looks like. It's a very runny and liquidy formula. It looks absolutely dewy on the skin. The shade Lungo has a lot of orangey undertones to it, and it kind of looks a little bit darker on my skin tone as well. I can still wear this on my skin tone because it kind of manages to, this really helps in counteracting all of the hyperpigmentation that is present on my skin. You'd really like this foundation if you have a drier skin type and if you want foundations that look like skin. So those are all the sugar foundations that I reach out to. Next, I've got the Inside Cosmetics HD High Coverage Dewy Finish Foundation, and the shade is MN35. I got this foundation not so long ago, and it's a really good affordable foundation. Comes in a tube packaging, very convenient. This is the shade MN35 from Inside Cosmetics. It looks a little bit lighter, but once it is blended out, it looks really nice. Let me just blend it here and show you. So it's a little bit light, but definitely not bad for being an affordable foundations, because affordable brands sometimes do not even have a shade range for dusky skin tones, and this is such a good foundation. Has a lot of coverage as well. Once I blend this foundation, kind of adjusts to the color of my neck, so it doesn't look too obvious on my skin. Next, I've got the Miss Claire Natural Weightless Foundation in the shade Warm Caramel. I really like this particular foundation as well from the affordable category. How the shade Warm Caramel looks like. I've got a ton of shades to choose from in this particular range of foundation, and the shade Warm Caramel is such a good match. Can you see how beautifully it just blends into my skin? It's a very natural kind of a foundation. It has a lot of dewy finish. Oh, I have an oily skin type. I really like this foundation on myself. I love the fact that it comes from an affordable brand and such an inexpensive price. Then I've got the Lakme 9 to 5 Weightless Mousse foundation. Comes in a tube packaging again, and this is in the shade Walnut, and the number is 11. That's how the shade Walnut looks like on me. So as you can see, it looks like a very good match on my skin tone because it is kind of merging with my own skin tone. But once I blend this out on my whole face, obviously this is a very dark tone of foundation, but the undertone is not too warm. I've got a little bit of a warmer complexion. This one leans more towards on the neutral side, so it looks a little bit ashy for some weird reason. The formula is very moussey and kind of silicone-y to touch. It will be suitable for oily skin types, not so much for dry skin type because it can cling on to your dry patches. This range from Lakme also has a very decent shades range for all skin tones. I've also got another shade from the Miss Claire liquid foundation, and this is in the shade Cinnamon, which is a little bit of a lighter shade than the shade Warm Caramel. I have this shade just in case I need a lighter shade of foundation. This can still work on my skin tone, but I prefer the shade Warm Caramel. I can also mix both of these shades together and work it on my complexion. Shade Cinnamon is definitely a lighter shade of foundation. Next, I've got absolutely one of my most favorite affordable foundations, which is the NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop liquid foundation. This is in the shade Mahogany, and I absolutely love this foundation. That's the shade Mahogany from the NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop foundation. Unfortunately, the shade Mahogany is not available anywhere in India when it comes to this particular foundation, which really breaks my heart. Even though it's a little bit darker and warmer, I prefer it this way. It has excellent coverage and my oily skin absolutely loves it, and nothing budges throughout the day with this foundation. There are foundation reviews I have on my channel. I will try to link it on the cards up on the screen. This is how the NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop foundation in the shade Mahogany looks like after it is blended. Can you see how beautiful it blended into my skin? For the love of the Can't Stop Won't Stop foundation, I got this in a lighter shade because this is the second darkest shade that is available apart from the shade Mahogany, and this happens to be in the shade Caramel, which is fairly light on my skin tone, but I just got it just in case. Probably I'll get a darker shade and mix both of them together to get my desired color. So that's the shade Caramel. As you can see, it is pretty light on my skin tone. I mean, it still looks like I can work with it, but I don't know, I have never put this shade Caramel on my entire face. Then I've got my Kbeauty liquid foundation in two different shades. Got the shade 175N and it is labeled as D. Love the packaging of these foundations. They look absolutely high-end and luxe. So I'm just gonna take a little bit So this is the shade 175N, which has a neutral undertone. Initially I got this foundation and then I kind of felt like something is off with this shade, so then I picked up the shade 180Y. This is also labeled as deep, so I think both of these shades come in the deep category. This is the swatch of the shade 180Y. As you can see, this has definitely a lot more warmth than the shade 175N, and that's why this particular shade suits me very well. It just disappears into my skin, whereas the shade 175N has a little bit of a white cast because of the neutral undertone. As you all know, this is a very sheer to light coverage foundation and it has a dewy finish. And I've got a really nice foundation from Colorbar. This is their 24 hours weightless liquid foundation and I have it in the shade FW8.2. It's a very unique kind of packaging. It's a tube, but also it has a pump on the inside, which is so cool. That's the shade FW8.2. So this one has a lot of warmth in it, as I mentioned earlier. If you follow me, you might be knowing that I love foundations with a lot of warmth in them because that's what works on my pigmented skin. Provides great coverage, yet it looks super natural on the skin. It's been a while since I used this foundation and probably I should use it more because it is such a good foundation. I've got a few Rimmel foundations with me as well. So I've got the Lasting Finish foundation from Rimmel and this is in the shade 500 Toffee. I got this very recently on a great sale on Rimmel from Nykaa. That is the shade Toffee. As you can see, it's a pretty good match on my skin tone. Honestly, it looks a little bit lighter on camera when I look it on my screen, but it's a very good match. Honestly, it's a very decent and good quality foundation. Most of the times Rimmel have great discounts on Nykaa, so buy it on those times. And I've got their Match Perfection foundation, which comes with this blue cap, and this is in the shade 501 and the shade is called Noisette. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But this is more suitable for drier skin types. The other foundation that I showed you is more suitable for oilier skin types. So this is the shade Noisette. I have not one. As you can see, they do not have much of a difference. Probably this particular shade is a little bit more on the neutral side, but it still works pretty well on my skin tone. That's how it looks after it is blended out. As you can see, it is pretty much disappeared into my skin. Both these foundations have medium to buildable kind of a coverage and they are really good foundations. I've also got another foundation from them which I absolutely love. It's a very unique kind of a foundation. So this is called their Lasting Radiance foundation. It is also anti-pollution and the shade that I have is called 502 Caramel. I don't know if you can see on the camera or not. It's got a little bit of specks of shimmer particles in it, which makes it so beautiful and ethereal looking on the skin. Now this particular shade Caramel is a bit darker on my skin tone. Do you see that? It's probably a shade darker. So whenever I wear this foundation on its own, it looks a little bit darker on my face and it doesn't match the skin on the rest of my body. So what I do with this particular foundation is that I mix it up with other lighter shades of foundations. That way I get a very beautiful glowy radiant effect. And by the way, yeah, I totally forgot to mention, it's a beautiful dewy finish foundation, but it doesn't feel tacky or sticky on the skin, you know. If you have oily skin and you don't want a dewy and glowy look, but you don't want to end up looking greasy or oily throughout the day, probably you should check out this foundation. I'm not really sure if it is still available on Nykaa because I see that a lot of Rimmel foundations and products in general are not available anymore. I love wearing this foundation during the winter because of the finish that it gives. I wish I could get this in a lighter shade so that I could put it all over my face, but unfortunately this is no more available and it just breaks my heart. I also got the Color Essence Liquid HD foundation and this is in the shade, dark beige. Can you guess what high-end foundation it looks like? Tell me from the packaging. Look at that. This is my MAC Studio Fix Fluid and this is the Color Essence Liquid Foundation. They look pretty much identical except for the lettering on the bottle. Anyway, coming back to the Color Essence foundation, I absolutely love this foundation. I really appreciate Color Essence for bringing a darker shade of foundation in their brand. They've also nailed it with the packaging on the inside as well. This doesn't come with a pump just like the MAC foundation. Honestly, you could have just put in a pump. You did not have to copy it to the T. So this is the shade Dark Beige. Again, the shade Dark Beige is a very workable shade on me because it has a lot of warmth in it. Any foundation that has a lot of warmth in it seems to be working, even though the shade is a little bit off. See that? I've just blended it here in this region and it looks very close. Once I contour my face or just bronze up my skin, this foundation just comes together. Very nice finish on the skin, has a medium to buildable kind of a coverage. Very good, affordable and beginner friendly product. Next, I've got a bunch of Maybelline Fit Me liquid foundations. So let's start from the lightest shade, which is the shade 332, and it is called Golden Caramel. I got the shade 332 Golden Caramel very recently. I thought maybe the shade falls right in between 330 and 335 Classic Tan. Shade 330 Toffee Caramel is a little bit lighter and the shade Classic Tan is a little bit darker, so I thought probably the shade that is right in between would be a better match on my skin tone, but boy, I was so wrong. This is the shade 332, what is it called again? Golden Caramel. This is Golden Caramel and the number is 332, which is way too light on my skin tone. Next, I've got the shade 330 Toffee Caramel. This is the original Fit Me foundation that I bought for myself because this was the darkest shade available back in the day. I can still work with this foundation because it does oxidize and become darker, but definitely it's a shade lighter to my skin tone. And this is the shade 330 Toffee Caramel. This is the shade Toffee Caramel, and as you can see, this is definitely darker than 332, which it shouldn't be. That's how Maybelline decided to number it. Then I've got the deepest shade for my skin tone, which is the shade 335 Classic Tan. This is the shade 335 Classic Tan. Although it looks like a shade that would work on my skin tone pretty well, it does, but after a while it definitely tends to get a little bit darker, meaning it oxidizes. This is the best suited shade for my skin tone in the Maybelline Fit Me range. This is a classic cult favorite foundation. Everybody loves it, from really dry to normal to oily and combination skin types. Everybody loves this. It's a very good affordable foundation with a lot of variety for all skin tones. Also got their Superstay liquid foundation, and this is in the shade 334 Warm Sun. So this is the shade 334 Warm Sun, and as you can see, it's slightly lighter than the shade 335 Classic Tan. Now this foundation has a very full coverage and it is completely matte, so it is suitable only for oily skin types. It's a good match, but it kind of pulls more warmer and more yellow tone than what I like my foundations to be. It's a decent, affordable, full coverage foundation that is available in the market. So this is 330 Toffee Caramel. That's 332 Golden Caramel, way too light, definitely not close to my skin tone. And this is Classic Tan, which is a very close match to my skin tone. It oxidizes in a while, so it just becomes one with my skin. And this is the shade Warm Sun from the Superstay range, and definitely has a lot more coverage than the Fit Me liquid foundation. I totally missed another Rimmel foundation earlier, so I've got their Lasting Matte Foundation, which comes in a tube packaging like so, and I've got this in the shade 407 Natural Caramel. So that is the shade 407 Natural Caramel from Rimmel. I've never really worn this foundation a lot, probably once or twice, but I do not really recall wearing this foundation. As you can see, lighter, and the formula feels a little bit moussey as well. So this is 407 Natural Caramel from Rimmel London. I must have not reached out to this foundation because of the way it looks on my skin. It's a bit lighter to my liking. I've got two different shades of foundation from the Estee Lauder Double Wear Liquid Foundation. So initially I've got it in the shade Cinnamon, and the number is 5W1.5. I've got a full review on this foundation on my channel. Like I mentioned, I will put it on the cards right up on the screen. It looks super classy and luxe, and guess what? it doesn't have a pump. I don't understand why brands do not include a pump in a liquid foundation when it comes to packaging like these, because it is so super essential. But anyway, initially I got the shade Cinnamon, which looks like that. Honestly, when I swatch it on my face, it looks like a very close match to my skin tone. This guy oxidizes like crazy. It at least gets 2 tones darker than your original foundation shade. I started noticing this after noticing my face in a lot of pictures. It kind of looks very dark when compared to my body, so that's when I decided to pick up a lighter shade of foundation from the same range, because I love this foundation on my oily complexion. So I've got this in the shade Bronze, and the number is 5W1, which is just a shade lighter than the shade Cinnamon. So this is the shade Bronze. As you can see, it looks way too lighter, and it seems like it would be a way more washed out color on my skin tone, but trust me, once the foundation settles down on your skin, it becomes way darker and oxidizes to a great extent. So this is the shade Cinnamon, the shade Bronze. I sometimes mix both of these shades together to get a good match on my skin tone. That way also it works pretty well. But I absolutely freaking love this foundation. Has a lot of coverage, doesn't move or budge or melt even in hot humid climate. It is totally worth all your money. Then I've got another liquid foundation from a high-end brand, which is the Makeup Forever Ultra HD foundation. Again, this is one of the most beautiful high-end foundations that are available in the market, but the shade that I have with me unfortunately is not available in India, which is such a sad thing, because we deserve a lot more darker and deeper and brown shades in our country. I asked one of my friends to pick it up when she was traveling abroad. There are shades available in this particular range, but not darker and deep enough shades. So this is the shade Y455. Please don't judge the packaging of this foundation. It has been through a lot. So that is the shade Y455. It's such a beautiful match on my skin tone. This foundation is truly undetectable on the skin. Whenever I have worn this foundation, people would just come up to me and ask, are you wearing foundation or not? Because it kind of tricks their eyes. It looks like you have something on, but it doesn't at the same time. It's a very beautiful foundation. This has a beautiful subtle dewy finish on the skin. Even though I have an oily skin type, I really love how it looks on my skin, and it looks absolutely undetectable in HD on camera as well. That's how it looks after blended. Can you see? It just disappears into my skin, and it looks like I have no makeup on my skin. It's such a beautiful foundation, and yeah, it has a pretty decent coverage as well. Even though it looks very disappearing and merging into the skin, it has a good coverage. Then I've got the Milani Conceal and Perfect 2-in-1 foundation, and this is in the shade 09 Tan. This was the darkest shade available when I first got this foundation, probably 2 to 3 years back. But now there is another deeper shade which I have next in this video. This is 09 Tan. So 09 Tan is definitely a lighter shade of foundation on myself. They also have a deeper shade now, which is the shade 11 Amber in the same foundation range. So that is the shade Amber, which is definitely darker and has a lot of warmth in it. And this is such a beautiful foundation, you guys. It's a very good high coverage foundation, and I absolutely love it on my skin tone. It's got a really good coverage, and it's got a very sheen of dewiness to it. Not completely dewy, not completely matte either. Lasts pretty well on the skin. Next, I've got the Lakme 9 to 5 Primer Plus Matte Foundation in 2 different shades. Really love the sleek packaging. It comes with a different kind of a applicator, which is like a spatula kind of a applicator. So the shade that I have first is called 380 Cool Walnut, and this is how it looks like. There's a little bit of a neutral undertone, and it looks a little lighter on my face, but once it is blended out, it works pretty fine. But I definitely wish that this particular shade was a little bit warmer. That way I would have liked it way more. Then I've got it in the shade Cool Cocoa. This is how the shade Cool Cocoa looks like. As you can see, it's a much darker shade on my skin tone. Sometimes I even mix these two shades together to kind of get my desired color, but the shade Cool Walnut works on its own as a good foundation on my skin tone. It's a really nice foundation. It's a medium to buildable kind of a coverage, and it's a soft matte finish and lasts pretty decently on the skin. That's Cool Walnut. As you can see, it is very close to my skin tone after it has been blended out. This is the shade Cool Walnut, which is way too dark on my skin tone. Then I've got a very beautiful skin-like foundation from the brand Forever 52. This is such a beautiful and one of my favorite foundations as well. So this is called their Ultra Definition Liquid Foundation, and this is in the shade FLF004, and it is called Caramel. That's how the foundation shade looks like. I know it's a little bit of a lighter shade of foundation, so when it applied on my face, freshly applied, it looks a little bit lighter, but definitely it takes a while to oxidize and settle down into my skin tone. I have also used this foundation in some of my tutorials. You can look at this foundation in action and see how it looks. It's a very beautiful skin-like finish, has a beautiful subtle glowy finish on the skin, and I absolutely love how flawless and beautiful it looks on the skin. You see that? It kind of merges into my skin and doesn't look that light from the swatch. Then I've got the OG MAC Studio Fix Liquid Foundation in 2 different shades. I've also got a detailed review on both of these shades on my channel. Do check it out. So first I've got the shade NC45. So that's NC45 from the Studio Fix Fluid. I've got it in the shade NC46. This is NC45 and the other one is called NC46. Actually, both the shades kind of work on my skin tone, but a better match when compared with each other is the shade NC46. As you can see, it's a little bit darker and works better on my complexion. NC45 also works. It kind of matches the color on my chest area, but NC46 seems to be a better match. It just disappears into my skin. It's a very cult favorite foundation. I keep this in my bridal vanity kit for brides as well. They've got all the shades that you require, from a very light complexion to a deep dark chocolatey skin tone. I highly recommend the MAC Studio Fix Fluid for professional makeup artists out there. Next I've got the Kiko Milano Full Coverage 2-in-1 Foundation and Concealer, and this is in the shade N145. I got this fairly recently, just a couple of months back. You might have seen this foundation in one of my haul videos. A unique kind of a packaging, comes in this frosted glass bottle, and inside you have a doe foot applicator, and this is how the shade N145 looks like. So as you can see, it's a slightly darker shade of foundation on myself, but the finish of this foundation is so beautiful. I tried getting a lighter shade of this foundation, but unfortunately the other lighter shade is not available right now on Nykaa, but it's a beautiful foundation with a lot of coverage, yet it looks super natural on the skin and lasts very beautifully as well. So that's how it looks after blended out. As you can see, it's kind of covered this area and looks super seamless on the skin. I've got a bunch of PAC liquid foundations with me. So first is the HD liquid foundation in the shade 4.5. So this is PAC HD liquid foundation in the shade 4.5. Initially I got this foundation thinking it would be a very similar shade to that of the MAC NC45. Honestly, it looks like a similar shade, but it is definitely a slightly lighter shade than NC45 from MAC. Then I decided to pick up a darker shade in the same foundation range, which is the next shade, and this is in the shade 4.7. As you can see, it's a little bit darker. So this is 4.7. As you can see, there is a huge jump from 4.5 to 4.7 because 4.7 seems to be a lot more darker, and after it is put onto the face completely, it definitely oxidizes and even becomes more darker as well. Unfortunately, my perfect shade lies between these two shades, so I always tend to mix both these shades together to get my perfect match. Sometimes it happens with foundations, you may not be able to find your perfect match, so you have to buy 2 different shades to get a custom match for yourself. PAC Studio HD foundation is definitely one of those foundations. Now this is loved by a lot of people on the internet, on offline as well, but my favorite foundation from PAC, which I discovered very recently, is the Spotlight Liquid Foundation. It's a beautiful frosted glass bottle with a pump packaging. I heard a lot about this foundation from the YouTuber Deepti Desik, and she raves about this foundation, and she is absolutely right. This is definitely more beautiful foundation than their HD liquid foundation. It's slightly expensive as well, but it is totally worth all your money. So I've got this in the shade 19 Coffee Walnut, and it is such a beautiful match on my skin tone. So this is the shade Coffee Walnut. Do you see how lighter it is compared to the shade 4.7? 4.7 is way too darker on my skin tone, and this is such a perfect match on me. It just blends right into my skin. It's a very beautiful skin-like finish foundation, yet it has a lot of coverage to it as well. Let me just blend it out. I kind of put it right on top of this pimple mark, and it has kind of just blurred out this whole area and has a beautiful skin-like finish. I absolutely love it. PAC Studio HD Liquid Foundation in 4.7, and this is 4.5, which is way too lighter. And then Kiko Milano's 145. This can also be used by professionals. It is such a good affordable foundation to have in your professional makeup kit. I've got two different foundations from the brand LA Girl. So one is the very famous HD high coverage liquid foundation, and I have it in the shade Bronze. So this is the shade Bronze. It's very slightly lighter to my skin tone, but it has a lot of golden and yellow undertones to it, so works pretty fine on my skin tone. And this is an extremely dewy finish foundation, so people with drier skin types would absolutely love how dewy it looks on the skin. I've also got the LA Girl Pro Matte High Definition Foundation, and this is in the shade Cafe. Honestly, I had the same foundation in a different shade called Caramel. I thought I picked up the shade Caramel when I picked up this bottle because I had completely finished up my old Pro Matte foundation. But turns out that I picked up the shade Cafe, which is a slightly lighter shade to the shade Caramel. It still works, but I prefer the shade Caramel on my skin tone. So that is the shade Cafe. It kind of matches my neck. The shade Caramel was a bang-on match to my skin tone, and unfortunately that particular shade is no more available in India. If you have an oily skin type, you would absolutely love this foundation. It's such a beautiful soft matte finish on the skin, and it is supposed to be the dupe of the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter foundation. I have a dupes video on my channel as well comparing both the foundations. I really like how it sits and performs on my oily skin type. So this is the Pro HD foundation in Bronze, and this is the shade Cafe. It's a shade lighter but still works.